Jimmy Murphy and Pierre McGuire here, and this is the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche. And after 22 years, Raymond Mark!
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Hey, Jimmy Murphy here, back on the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network. My co-host Pierre McGuire here. And Pierre, probably my favorite holiday of the year, actually, here in the States. Thanksgiving coming up this Thursday, Thanksgiving week here in the States. And, you know, we'll get into it later, and we're going to focus on it Wednesday and Friday as well. But some unbelievable days of hockey coming up. 14 games on the slate on Wednesday and 15 on Friday. A lot of day hockey as well, as it's Black Friday in the States. A lot of people have the day off. So this is one of my favorite weeks of the year. Obviously, a lot of travel for people. I wish you safe travels and no traffic or no delays in the airport. Pierre, I see you are already in a destination spot. Where are you this week?
I'm in northern Quebec right now with my wife, Melanie. This is where our children were born. We're going to have Thanksgiving with my mother-in-law and also my mother, who's 87 years of age up here in Quebec. So really excited about that. And then on Friday, Jimmy, I'm going to make my way down to Hamilton, New York to watch Niagara University and the Colgate Raiders play a 2-game set on Friday and Saturday, and then come right back up here to Quebec so I can watch a ton of hockey on Sunday all the way through to the next weekend when I'll be in Ithaca, New York to watch Cornell and Colgate, which will be phenomenal hockey at Lina Rink and at the Class of 65 rink in Hamilton. It's just phenomenal. That series, when you watch Colgate and Cornell play, Jimmy, it's off the charts. It's good.
Good rivalry. It's great rivalries in college hockey, and we're going to get into some college hockey at the end of this episode, and then we've got an announcement we'll make as well concerning NCAA hockey. But Pierre, let's look back on the weekend that was here in the NHL, and there were some great games, some great matchups, and you know, I don't know if the NHL did it on purpose, but there were at least 4 or 5 rivalry games that went on, and we're going to look into 3 of them. One of them was our game of the week, as we told you on Friday. The New Jersey Devils hosting the New York Rangers. The Rangers get Shesterkin back. The Devils got Jack Hughes back, and it was your typical Devils-Rangers game at the Prue. And Pierre, one of the questions I remember you saying was, let's see if the Devils fans can outnumber the Rangers fans. I don't know if it was just because the Rangers won, but it didn't sound like it. It sounded pretty split, if not more in favor of the Rangers fans. The Rangers come away with a 5-3 win there. Pierre, what was the difference for you in that win for the New York Rangers?
The depth players for the New York Rangers and the face-off play. Last Friday when we talked about the Rangers, we talked about their improvement in face-offs, about 6% from last year to this year. Well, they out-faced off the New Jersey Devils in that game on Saturday night by almost 7%, Jimmy. So when you look at it, face-offs mattered for the New York Rangers, but the depth players, Jimmy Vesey, Tyler Pitlick, Barclay Gaudreau, those guys made a massive difference. And you talked about the players that were coming back for both teams. There was no Nico Hischier for New Jersey, but there was no Adam Fox for New York. Mm-hmm. So they're all kind of balancing out. You can see what Hughes does. I mean, Jack Hughes makes such a massive difference for the New Jersey Devils. Jimmy, he's a human highlight reel. Every time he touches a puck, something special is happening for the New Jersey Devils. And Tommy Fitzgerald, their general manager, has got to be so excited about that going forward. Mm-hmm. But for the New York Rangers, we're seeing a team that's got balance because of the depth players that they have. They've got star power, especially with Artemi Panarin, who Jimmy is off to just an amazing start. So I look at it, that game was as advertised. It was a fantastic game for both fan bases. Unfortunately, for New Jersey, they lose, but for the Rangers, they got to be excited about their brand right now. They've done a great job as a coaching staff, as a managerial staff, and the players are really playing great hockey.
And you brought up the name Jimmy Vesey there. He gets the game winner. Let's give it a listen.
Third period, Devils with the last 4 shots. Trocheck finds a trailing Vesey. It's free. Vanacek makes the save. Rebound goes. Jimmy Vesey does it again, and the Rangers lead.
Oh, that's a killer.
You hear Kenny Danico. By the way, being totally transparent with you, Jimmy, when I went to New Jersey Devils training camp way back in the early 1980s, Kenny and I played together. I have so much respect for the way he carries himself. Kenny is a tremendous guy, was a phenomenal player. What a career he had. One of the few guys that had his number retired, obviously, in New Jersey. But he does a really good job on those Devil broadcasts. His passion and his energy for the team, I think, is fantastic. I really do.
And he knows his stuff. Character guy. And Pierre, I was going to say with Jimmy Vesey, look, obviously his second tour of duty here with the New York Rangers. What's different about Jimmy Vesey this time around to you?
I think there's more urgency in his game. He understands now he's not the flash and dance Hobie Baker winner that he was at Harvard University. He can't be that, not and survive in the NHL. So he had to find a way to reinvent himself. And I think, you get kicked in the teeth enough. He had once been in New York. He got moved out. You start to see, you go to Toronto, you a little bit in Buffalo, you get kicked around enough, and then you say, okay, what do I have to do to stay? And I think the biggest thing is he found a way to reinvent himself, and that's with more of a pugnacious attitude, getting to the net, understanding he has to block shots, being harder on board play, having a stronger stick in one-on-one situations rather than just trying to be a toe dragger. And I think he's found that, and I'm so happy for him. You talk about smart kids in the NHL, Jimmy. Jimmy Vesey is one of those kids. He's a really smart kid. I have a lot of time for him.
He is. And obviously he went to Harvard, right? There we go.
They're not all smart, Jimmy, that went there, but he's one of the ones that is pretty wise. And he also went to Belmont Hill, Jimmy, one of your big rivals when you were
Yes. Hey, we're going to have to, Pierre, I haven't even looked at the schedule, but you and I got to go to a St. Sib's Belmont Hill game together this year.
Oh, we will for sure. There's a whole lot of nasty that goes on there. It's good stuff.
It is. It's fun. Good times. Hey, listen, speaking of Belmont Hill, they're a little, 15, 20 minutes away from TD Garden in Boston. And that was the site for another chapter in the Bruins Habs rivalry on Saturday night. The Canadiens, of course, a week before on November 11th in Montreal, gave the Bruins a 3-2 loss in overtime and really, went toe-to-toe with them. I wouldn't say the Bruins had their best game there, but that's not the Canadiens' fault. The Canadiens brought it that game, and they proved any given night they can hang, and they've done that a lot with contenders. However, Pierre, we get to this game here on Saturday, and I don't know about you, but I'm looking at this game going, okay, the Bruins are getting another shot at Montreal just a week later. It's also big bad Bruins night. Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Wayne Cashman, Jerry Cheevers, the whole crew from the 70s, from the 70 team to 72 team are there in the house. And not only that, and I never knew this, Pierre. I told you this over the phone. I never knew that those two Stanley Cup champion teams, the 1970 Bruins and 1972 Bruins, were never able to raise their banners like every team has done for so long to the old Garden rafters. So what did the Bruins do? And to commemorate this and to celebrate the centennial season, there's been a lot of this stuff going on here in Boston this season. There'll be more. They gave them that chance. And I'll tell you, I got to sit in on a scrum with Wayne Cashman, Dallas Smith, and those guys were so touched. And you could, Cashman got a bit emotional. There's a lot of things, I won't get into it, but him and the Bruins kind of, I wouldn't call it a divorce, but they had a pause in their relationship. And that, that's for them to figure out. But this was his first time back in Boston in many years. And he really was emotional. It was cool to see. And I actually found out through a source that they're looking to retire his number and put that up there with those banners, put number 12. And I think that's well-deserved. It should have been put up there a long time ago. You got to watch him play, Pierre, and we'll get back to this game that happened, but I want your take. I'm just hearing stories there. I grew up in Boston. My grandfather was the one who introduced me to hockey and to Bruins hockey, had season tickets, and he would always tell me the stories, but I never got to see these guys play. And from everything I'm told, he was the heart and soul of those teams, wasn't he, Wayne Cashman?
Well, when you look at obviously Bobby Orr being there, and you talked about Dallas Smith being there, and I could think back to when Don Horry was playing there. He was a shot blocking machine. But up front, you with Busick and Esposito and Cashman, Pye McKenzie, just phenomenal stories with those big bad Bruins. And Wayne really personified what a big bad Bruin really was. He was a feared guy. He dominated in small rinks. So back in the day, when you think about it, you had Chicago Stadium that was small. You had the Odd in Buffalo. You had obviously the Garden in Boston. They were small ice surfaces. It was not hockey for the faint of heart. And Wayne Cashman made it that much more difficult. Jimmy, I have to tell you, I'm not as old as I look, but my experience level would tell you that I've been around 34 years in the NHL. I had the privilege of coaching against Wayne.
Wow.
When he was a coach down in Tampa and also in New York. And I would tell you that not only was he a tremendous player, an elite player, he was a fantastic coach. People forget in the 98 Olympics, he was one of the assistant coaches to Mark Crawford on that Canadian staff. Now, did they win the gold? No, they didn't. Did they medal? No, they did not. But that team was well prepared. They ran into, a freak show in Dominik Hasek in the Czech Republic in the 98 Olympics. But Wayne was an amazing player. He was a great coach. But what he's really been, a tremendous ambassador for whomever he's been with and whatever team he's represented. He's just a tremendous ambassador of the game. He really is.
Well, I hear you say this with Mitch Melnick all the time, that we didn't plan to say this, but as a great segue, Pierre, because I had a story I was going to tell you, surprise you with. So, and he came up to me and we started talking about it again. So I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan, Pierre, and always have been since I was about 15 years old, right? And so my first year covering the Bruins was 01-02. And I get to training camp, and Wayne Cashman is the assistant for the Bruins on Ftorik's staff then. And, we're sitting there in the hallway after a training camp practice, and it was, September 12th, 2003. So when Johnny Cash passed away, and I was just sitting there, and somebody told me about it, and I was like, oh, man, I was bummed, and I'm sitting there, and Cash is like, what's wrong with you? And I said, Johnny Cash just passed away. He goes, no, because I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan. And I said, well, that makes sense. Cash. And he goes, I'll tell you a great story, Murph. So long story short, Johnny Cash was playing a concert in the old Boston Garden. And he arrives a day early, and, they're getting all their equipment in there and getting it ready to set up. And the Bruins are coming off the ice as Cash is in the hallway there. And so Wayne Cashman is walking by him after the practice. He's like, oh my God, that's Johnny Cash. And he goes up, he introduces himself, and he's looking around. He's like, I don't know. What do I do? I don't have anything to sign. Could you wait 1 second? And he looks at the train and goes, hey, you got a Sharpie? Trainer gets him a Sharpie, and he looks around and goes, what? And Cash goes, grab one of those sticks. So whose stick does he grab? Bobby Orr's stick. And he gets an autograph of Johnny Cash on Bobby Orr's stick, and it's still. So I saw him the other day, and I brought that story up, and he said, hey, still hanging in my basement, Murph. It's one of my most prized possessions. So, yeah, good for Wayne Cashman. I hope they do raise that up there. But getting back to the current times in that game. So as I was saying, all those things are going on, right? There's so many factors that you would think would have the Boston Bruins really revved up for this game. You got the revenge factor. You got these guys in the house. They don't want to let them down. I mean, if this was one of those games, like I talk to my betting friends sometimes on that Ice Guys show, and they say, there's those games that are just sort of scheduled wins or scheduled losses. This is one they would call a scheduled loss for the Canadiens, but the Canadiens just didn't seem to have anything in their tank to change that. I mean, it was almost like they accepted their fate, Pierre. I thought, and I watched the Canadiens a lot, I thought that was one of their worst games of the season. I don't know about you.
Oh, no, we agree wholeheartedly. But the big boys came to play for Boston. And by big boys, I mean Trent Frederick. I mean Charlie Coyle. I mean Charlie McAvoy. I mean Brandon Carlo.
James Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah, James, JVR came to play. But the big boys for Boston came to play. And for Montreal, they're still a work in progress. The expectation of the organization in Boston is last year wasn't good enough, especially because of the first-round playoff loss to Florida. And they're not going to go through that again. So they're setting the template going forward for how they want to carry themselves. And when they have a Saturday night at home against a rival team, they're not letting them off the mat. And they didn't. And that's a real sign of a well-coached team from Jimmy Montgomery and his staff. And it's also a sign of the internal leadership mechanism of the team. And I have a ton of respect for that with what Boston's doing right now, Jimmy.
And Pierre, don't forget now, they did this like in the immediate aftermath of the Milan Lucic news breaking, where Milan was arrested for domestic incident. So there's like this distraction that could kind of take them away from their focus there. And they weren't distracted at all. And, I look at that leadership core, Brad Marchand, he was the only one to address us, by the way, after the game. It was an optional skate. And, he touched on that. But, I mean, you could tell talking to some of the guys, I just talked to them off the record, they were zoned in. And nothing was taking them off their focus there. And it showed on the ice. And you brought up those three guys, Charlie Coyle, JVR, Trent Frederick. We're going to go to a goal right here This was Trent Frederick's second goal, would prove basically to put the Canadiens away. It was right after Yuri Slafkovsky made it 3-1. Maybe the Canadiens are getting a little momentum when the Bruins said, and Coyle finds Frederick coming out of the penalty box. Let's give it a listen.
Ski knocks it down. One shot on the Montreal power play. And here's Trent Frederick. He scores! Fresh out of the box. It's 4-1.
Now, the chemistry that line has formed here, and, I don't know why you always tell me the names, but you remember that line. I think we brought this up last week that Tampa formed for their cup run and all the, when they started to build their dynasty, that third line they had, it was Gaudreau, who's now in New York.
Bowman in Calgary, Yanni Gordon, Seattle.
Thank you. All right. And they kind of said, this is the type of line you need to succeed in the playoffs. Secondary is kind of an insult to them, but it's sort of that line that, okay, you dealt with our first line with our superstars. Now deal with these big boys coming at you. And that's what that line is doing right now. They are just powering through the opponents. And Trent Frederick is really turning into the power forward that they thought they had in him when they drafted him.
Oh, that's so well said. So, Jimmy, I'll take you back to the 2016 draft. And this is just a history lesson. There were a whack of kids that were drafted out of the St. Louis area. Kelly Chase, Keith Tkachuk, and Jeff Brown did a phenomenal job in those years running the youth hockey program, the elite youth hockey programs in St. Louis. Matthew Tkachuk went 6th overall. Clayton Keller went 7th. Logan Brown went right after them. Luke Cunnin, he went right after Logan Brown. The 29th pick in the draft that year was Trent Frederick, St. Louis kid. Went to the University of Wisconsin, played for Tony Granato there for 2 years. But here's the thing. Last year for Trent Frederick, it was a career year. He had 17 goals. He was plus 28. You could see this starting to happen last year, Jimmy. You really could. But what the Bruins did in that draft in 2016 with the 14th pick, they took Charlie McAvoy. So you start to see, if you get 2 picks in the first round, a few years later, so now we're talking 7-8 years later, that are playing at the level that McAvoy and Frederick are, that's like a home run. That's a grand slam. It's phenomenal. Yeah. And, Jimmy, I'm just going to take you down memory lane. I remember it clear as day. The Winnipeg Jets are playing the Boston Bruins. Trent Frederick's playing. It's his first game. He's playing on a line with David Backes. He gets in a hellacious fight with Brandon Tanev of the Winnipeg Jets. Who's no shrinking violet, by the way. He won a national championship at Providence College. He's a tough kid. He's a big open ice hitter, and he's a tough kid. Well, Trent Frederick, he did a number on him. And you can see from that point on, you talked about the big bad Bruins. That's what Trent Frederick's starting to personify right now. He's a big bad Bruin. Now, can he score like Cam Neely? No. But can he get involved physically like Cam? Yeah, he can. Yeah. Here's the biggest difference for Trent Frederick, Jimmy. His skating has improved unbelievably.
It's unreal. It's unreal. I don't know who he trains with in the summer. You may know, Pierre, but whoever it is doing a great job because he has really put on a power skating clinic. And you look at that goal. I mean, the goal we just mentioned there, that was him just getting the wheels going and going right down ice and right to the net. And the other thing I like about him too, and Jim Montgomery mentioned this the other day, is his defensive game has come along. He's really back checking. He's getting back there to help the defenseman a lot. And he's really taken it upon himself to be a responsible player when it comes to the defensive game. And I think I like too, what I talked to some of the teammates, like I've talked to Charlie Coyle about him on and off the record. And he's like, Murph, this kid's the real deal. He gets it. He gets what we're trying to do here, and he wants to be part of it. So that's a great sign for the Boston Bruins.
100%. And the biggest thing is you talked about the defensive awareness. When you're able to do that, the coach trusts you. They're going to put you on in key situations. So your ice time is going to go up. Your chances of score are going to go up. Your minutes are going to go up. Your plus minus is going to be better. You're going to get on more special teams. And then you become a revered part of the organization. And that's where Trent Frederick is trending right now as a revered member of the organization.
He is. I mean, he's been used on the PK a lot more this year. Pierre, let's go to another game. And this was a game that you were definitely focused in on as well as me. The Colorado Avalanche Stars. I mean, what a great battle early on in the season here. This is what I was talking about. And God bless the NHL for their scheduling because there were some really good battles like this that were on the slate this past Saturday night. Now, Pierre, the Dallas Stars come out and take a 3-0 lead and lose 6-3. What the hell happened?
So guys like Miles Wood, Ross Colton, Logan O'Connor, Andrew Cogliano, Joel Kiviranta, Freddie Olesen, all these guys got involved. The depth players got involved for Colorado. They won races. They were physical. They went hard to the net. They drove the Dallas Stars defense, which is really a focal point of their team. And I can tell you, Pete DeBoer was a phenomenal coach. He's always preaching that. They're a tough team to play against. His teams in New Jersey were hard to play against. His teams in Florida were hard to play against. Teams in San Jose were hard to play against. Pete DeBoer is a really good structural coach. But here's the thing. What I loved about that game, you see the influence of college hockey in the National Hockey League. Miles Wood, Boston College. Ross Colton, University of Vermont. Logan O'Connor, University of Denver. Andrew Cogliano, University of Michigan. Joel Kiviranta, he's a Helsinki U. Let's just say Finland U. But he's not a college player. But Freddie Olsen played at Nebraska Omaha.
Yep.
So you see that. And then you see, obviously, Cale Makar, University of Massachusetts. And I know, Jimmy. Easy. And then the other one is Devon Taves. Devon Taves played at Quinnipiac. What a phenomenal program. Jack Johnson played at the University of Michigan. I can go down the line. So Colorado's done a phenomenal job building their roster. Joe Sakic and his group they built a tremendous roster. But I think there's always one game in your first 20 that sets the tempo for your next 20. And I think for Colorado, that game in Dallas on Saturday night set the tempo for them for their next 20 games.
For sure. And one guy that's always seems to be setting the tempo, but we've agreed, Pierre, just doesn't seem to get the love around the league. And maybe that's because of, the other superstars he's got on the team with McKinnon and Makar. But that's Mikko Rantanen. This guy, it just does everything. And once again, he got the game winner. Here, give it a listen right here.
Somehow stayed in with possession and a backhand score by Colorado. It was Rantanen who got the puck and roofed it up high.
Pierre, what makes him so effective?
He's big. He's strong. He's got hockey sense. Jimmy, the first time I saw him play, he was a kid playing for TPS, which is Turku, which is on the west coast of Finland. And I said to myself, oh, my gosh, this guy's really good.
And how old was he then?
Listen, at the time, I was fortunate enough to be part of the management group that drafted Jaromir Jagr. Believe me, the size and all that, pretty similar. I wasn't saying he was going to be as good as Jagr, but there were characteristics that brought you back to the 1989-90 season when Jaromir was running roughshod when he was playing in Kladno, just dominating people. So you saw that. But people forget this. It might have been the quietest 55-goal season ever last year for Mikko Rantanen. 55 goals last year, Jimmy. Yeah. Nobody talked about it. I never heard too many people talk about it. I watch a lot of games like you do. I read a lot. I pay attention. I didn't hear too many people talking about that. He's just a hockey player. He's a big, smart, physical, passionate hockey player. That's what he is.
Yeah, they're blessed to have him there. And look, Bednar definitely knows he can depend on him. And he's shown that, like when McKinnon's been out, and that's why I'm surprised that he doesn't get more love in the media there. But he's doing a great job with them. Pierre, we're going to switch gears here. Well, quickly before we switch to college hockey, there's two other teams we want to talk about here. First off, the Minnesota Wild, right? And look, Pierre, I know that you don't like to talk about coaches' jobs, and we're not going to speculate anything. But all we can say is it's not a pretty picture right now for Dean Evason over in Minnesota after they go 0-for-2 in Sweden and just they still can't find that traction and they still can't find that identity that they seem to be developing under him, but haven't found this season. We said it before, trips like that are kind of things you can use to bond. You're around the guys a lot more. You're away from the regular media you have to deal with. And it just didn't happen for Minnesota over there, did it?
They weren't as good as they could have been. The fact that they were able to get points in 2 games, I think, Jimmy, matters a lot. So, they don't beat Ottawa, they don't beat Toronto, but they get points out of the game, out of those games, I should say. That's positive. Marc-Andre Fleury talked about the battle level, especially in the last game with Toronto, which was pretty high. So that's a positive.
Right.
But they've got to start to get traction. I love the term you just used. They got to start to find traction. And the one thing that I do know, there's a really strong relationship between Billy Guerin and Dean Evason and the coaching staff, the entire staff, which I think is a really strong staff. they've got to find a way for their players to get to the next level. And so it's not going to be easy. I don't think anybody expected Winnipeg to be this good. And so that's something. They're in their division. They need that to recognize that and understand that it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's a tough situation for them right now, but I think anything less than the playoffs would be pretty tough for Minnesota because I think they're a playoff built kind of a team. I really do.
They really are. And they're built to have Billy Guerin's identity that he had as a player. You can see that in some of the signings and transactions he's made. So I hope they get it together. I've known Billy for a long time, so I hope they get it together. Another team right now that's trying to find themselves and again, find some traction is doing it in an old school way. But how much does that old school way last in a new wave of hockey players? It's a new generation of players that maybe aren't going to respond to benchings as well as some players did in the past. And, that's Patrick Laine and Johnny Gaudreau right now. What do you think is going to happen here, Pierre? I mean, sooner or later, this method of benching him in game or benching him for a full game is going to run its course, and it can go sideways.
It could. I've done it before. I remember when I took over the Hartford Whalers, two of my better players at the time were Michael Nylander and Jeff Sanderson, and both of them were tremendous young players. They really were, and they went on to have phenomenal careers. But I remember we played the Bruins, I want to say on a Wednesday night, and then on a Thursday night we were in Philadelphia, and I told Nylander and Sanderson to stay behind because I was trying to create organizational standards. I didn't think they played to the standard that they were capable of, and I was trying to send a message early on. After that, the next 20 games, Jimmy, you'd have to look it up, but I think the next 20 games we had the third best record in the National Hockey League, and Jeff and Michael were both a big part of that. They really were. They did play tremendously well, and I was really proud of them. But I think sometimes you try to get players' attention, especially younger players. Now, in the case of Laine and in the case of Johnny Gaudreau, they're not young players anymore. They've been around the league for a while. This is where I think it's so important to have a veteran person like Mark Recchi on your staff. And so if you're Pascal Vincent, who's never really coached in the NHL as a head coach, and never's coached in the NHL as a head coach, having an ally like Recchi on your side, that could help. But this is dangerous. Now, one other thing, Jimmy. Nobody knows in this league, I don't believe, Patrick Laine better than Jarmo Kekalainen and his assistant, Ville Sarin. They know him really well from Finland, obviously. And so I think that's another thing that's a positive to get him going. But they need both those players to be going 100% if they're going to start to get some traction in the standings. They really have to.
Pierre, at what point, though, you mentioned they're veterans. They're paid a lot.
Yep.
They have clout in the league.
Yeah.
If they don't get going, does it get to the point where maybe change of scenery might have to happen, and maybe they have to start to explore that? I mean, when do you as a coach, say to your GM, "Hey, man, I just don't know if this is going to work with this guy."
Yeah, I'd say in this case, the coach isn't going to be going to the GM. I think the GM is going to be going to the president of hockey operations. Okay. In this case, it's going to be Jarmo going to John Davidson and saying, you know what, we've got an ability to trade either one or both of these players. And I don't like to speculate like this. I don't think it's fair to the players of the organization. But to just say it, both those players have value in the league still. Both of them, Gaudreau and Laine, both have value in the league. So it's not like Columbus would be dropping players and not getting better. They'd be trading if, and I stress, if they were to do this. I don't have any inside info that's telling me they are, but people have to be looking at this because of the excellent point you brought up, Jimmy, and that is they've both been sat out of the lineup. And, they're their highest paid players. When you're set out of the lineup, there's a reason why that's happening. You're trying to get everybody's attention, and so far it hasn't worked.
Here's another thing, Pierre, and this just came to my head, and we didn't even discuss this, but I want to get it out. I looked at that team when they went out and they signed Gaudreau, right? Yep. I kind of sat back and I'm like, I don't know. I don't see the fit right now of bringing in another superstar like that when they kind of struck me as a team that was on the rebuild's not the word, but a retool. And they're starting to really integrate younger guys. and they're starting to push towards the future. And then you bring in a big name like that on a big contract. And I felt like I just don't know if that's the right move right now. I'm not blaming Gaudreau at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, as a general observation, do you think that was the right fit at the right time?
I thought there were better fits than Columbus, but I also understand what Jarmo Kekalainen was trying to do as a general manager, and that is to jumpstart his fan base, jumpstart his team, and say, we're bringing in a guy that's a 100-point player, and you're going to have him and Patrick Laine and, Boone Jenner, and you're going to have Zach Werenski, and we're going to have some really good players here. And we're going to get going, and we're going to be a playoff team. And I've done playoff games in Columbus. I haven't been many, but I have done them. And I'll tell you what, it's an electrified atmosphere. It really is. Columbus is a fun hockey town.
I love it.
It really is when they're going. But they need everybody going. And right now that's not happening, Jimmy. They need everybody to be a lot better. To me, the best fit, there were two fits for Johnny Gaudreau, I thought, if he wasn't staying in Calgary. One was New Jersey, and I think they were involved in the discussion. And the other one would have been Philadelphia, which I think Johnny could have helped them sell some tickets.
Well, you know what? We usually go to this, and I'm sorry to our producers, I'm going to pull a curveball here. We usually do our Twitter questions at the end, but as we're talking, I mean, this question goes right in line with what we're talking about right now. You guys were discussing Michael Bunting. That's last week. I feel like there are a lot of examples of high-performing players who move to a new team and struggle or decline. How often is there a failure to account for team and city-specific factors that play into player performance? Even with all the scouting, analytics, and hockey IQ the clubs apply to personnel decisions, sometimes I feel like there is still an assumption that BC X player put up X, Y numbers here. He'll do that when we get him here, neglecting the impact of role, setting, and surroundings. Pierre, you were saying this to me off the air exactly about Johnny Gaudreau and Calgary.
Evan, that's a great question, I think. And I think back to when Johnny was in Calgary, and you look at the line with Lindholm and Tkachuk and how great that line was. You had the hockey sense and the brilliance of Lindholm. He's a really, really smart player. You had the smash mouth component and the high skill level of Matthew Tkachuk. And then you had Johnny Gaudreau, who could process the game as a smaller man as well as any small player I've seen in the league. His hockey sense is brilliant. And he's not shy. He's not afraid. So that line was amazing. And then when it got dismantled, I was like, uh-oh, this is not going to be good for Calgary. And it hasn't been. Now, again, different general manager, different situation, different coaching staff. So this isn't on the Calgary Flames right now, but you wonder about what went into the mindset of how they did their business. And, I don't know what the negotiations were like with Tkachuk. I don't know what the negotiations were like with Gaudreau. I just don't know. It would be fair to say that I knew because I didn't know. But I think it's important, to Evan's question, to always evaluate who was the player playing with, what was the role the player was in, how does he deal with coaching, who are the guys that have coached him before. Right. There's so many different informational situations that you need to evaluate before you actually make trades. And I can just say this from personal experience. I learned this from Craig Patrick, Bob Johnson, Scotty Bowman, and Brian Burke. Mm-hmm. Those are the people I learned this from. And it's really important to have mentors and people that understand how to make constructive trades that will make your team better.
With fits.
And the player fits. And that's Evan's point.
Yeah, great point. And I just thought, I said, we might as well go to that now because
it's good.
Totally applies to Johnny Gaudreau right now, I think, for sure. So let's switch gears, Pierre, because we're pretty excited about what we got coming up this week. And we'll tell our listeners now, and then we'll kind of look at some college hockey from this weekend. But Pierre, you booked some nice guests for us coming up on Wednesday and Friday.
Yeah, so excited. Greg Brown, who's the outstanding new head coach at Boston College. He took over the job when Jerry York stepped aside, and Jerry York is one of the living legends in U.S. college hockey, whether he was at Clarkson College or whether he was at Bowling Green University, and eventually at the end of his career with Boston College. And then for Greg to take over that program after being an assistant coach at Boston College, an assistant coach with the New York Rangers, a head coach with Dubuque in the USHL, and then he gets to come back to his alma mater. So we're really excited to have Greg on Wednesday. And Jimmy, you watch all those games. I know you were watching on Friday night. Boston College is a murderer's row of players. I mean, they got a lot of NHL guys on that team.
Yeah, I'm watching that. They're playing UConn, and those guys, they were getting a handful. I mean, you give credit to UConn. They're hanging in there, but then all of a sudden it's kind of like they said, okay, let's turn it on, boys. And Carter Gauthier, it just goes in. Like that was just a beautiful goal. And like just the skill on that team, the wave after wave that they can send at you. I mean, I was looking at it today, Pierre, 14 kids already drafted on 14 NHL draft picks on that team right now. That's insane.
Well, some of them, like you talked about, Cutter Gauthier was a first-round pick of Philadelphia. I'd be absolutely shocked if he's back at Boston College next year. I think he'll be in Philadelphia whenever BC season is over. I look at Will Smith, a first-round pick of the San Jose Sharks. I look at Ryan Leonard, a first-round pick of the Washington Capitals. There's so many. They're just so deep with so many good players. And I go watch them practice. I watch them play games, and I'm like you. I'm like, whoa. When they decide to amp it up a little bit, they're pretty darn good.
It is. It's insane. And then we've got another good coach coming on for Friday, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And he's a Stanley Cup winner as a player. He was a tremendous coach with the Boston Bruins as an assistant. Jay Pandolfo. I have so much respect and admiration for the way Jay carries himself, both as a person and as a hockey professional. And you look at, for instance, he's got Macklin Celebrini. And Jimmy, unless I'm really wrong, he's going first overall in this next summer's draft. He's just a phenomenal player. And you think about Lane Hudson, the Montreal Canadiens have to be so excited about him. Luke Tuck, who's a second-round pick from the 2020 draft. I can go down the line.
Yeah.
Both these teams, BU and BC, are phenomenal. They're led by amazing men, Greg Brown at BC and obviously Jay Pandolfo at BU. So we're really excited to have Jay on as well. So this is great. I just love talking about
College Hockey Week on the eye test, Pierre. And Pierre, I was telling you Celebrini the other night, and that was my first time that I've really been able to, just because of my NHL and Bruins obligations, like I've been able to really just hone in on some college games, and I really got into that BU main game. And, the announcers said it best, and I couldn't find a clip anywhere. I wanted to have it for everyone here, but Celebrini takes it from his own end and goes coast to coast, and he doesn't score. He hits it off the crossbar, and the guy says, that has to be the best no goal that I've ever seen in my life. And it was true. It was just like, oh, that's supposed to go in. Come on, after all that work, but it was. And, the fans there were just like, wow. I mean, they cheered, even though he missed, they were cheering him just for the effort it took to get it to that point. And I'm saying this kid, man, he is something. He's got to be going number one.
You look at the potpourri of phenomenal players that have been BU. I can start with the 1980 Olympic team, Jack O'Callahan and Mike Eruzione. You look at going later years, Mike Sullivan, who played almost 800 games in the NHL, distinguished coach. Sean McEachran, who had the privilege of coaching in Pittsburgh and winning a Stanley Cup with. I can go down Phil Von Stefanelli, who played a little bit for the Vancouver Canucks. And then you look at the later years with Jack Eichel. You look at some of the great players they've had at BU over time. Pardon me?
Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah, Charlie McAvoy, Charlie Coyle, Charlie McAvoy, Matt Grizzlick. I mean, I can go down the line with all these players. It's been just phenomenal to watch. But I think when it's all said and done, the Celebrini kid might be right up there. And Jimmy, there are not a lot of freshmen that have won the Hobey Baker. Jack Eichel's one of them. Paul Correa's another one of them. We could be looking at something like that with Macklin Celebrini. We could.
I think the hockey IQ, the jets he can turn on. Yep. And it's funny, at that game, Pierre, I think I was telling you a lot of the Bruins were there because they got so many BU alums. So Grizzlick and McAvoy are there, and then Swayman and Montgomery were sitting in a box together. And so yesterday at practice, I looked down on the ice. And there's Jimmy Montgomery he's usually wearing a scally cap or a helmet. We'll get to that in a bit. But he's wearing a BU hat and he's got a BU sweatshirt on. And I get right in, he comes off and he comes into the press room for his post-practice media scrum with us. And I say, hey, you lose a bet, eh? And he said, yep, but I'm a man of my word. Here we are. I'm owning up to it. I lost. So he made a bet with the guys there because, of course, he's a UMaine alum. It was good stuff. But, he's starting to really don these scally caps because they've been doing it for these era nights that they're having. They recognize the Bruins from the 20s, 30s, 40s, kind of the Peaky Blinder era there. And then, obviously the big bad Bruins, the other one, he had another black cap on. I think our producers are saying he's wearing it better than me. What do we think here, guys?
I don't know. Maybe I need to get it on, Jimmy. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll work on that. Just one quick story on Jimmy Montgomery. His father was a tremendous athlete in Montreal. He was a professional boxer. And I tried to recruit Jimmy when I was coaching at St. Lawrence, working with Joe Marsh. Jimmy played for the Pembroke Lumber Kings in the Central Ontario Hockey League. And I can just tell you, he was a highly sought-after player. He was a tremendous, tremendous college player, obviously part of a national championship team at Maine where he was a captain. But I remember watching him play for the Pembroke Lumber Kings, and it wasn't an easy road trip to get from Canton, New York to Pembroke. Let me tell you that, Jimmy.
Yeah.
A lot of snowstorms you drive through to get there.
You know, Pierre, look, I mean, we were blessed as media to have a guy that's so media savvy and so willing to just shoot the breeze all the time, and Bruce Cassidy for so long there. And we had Claude before that. So Jimmy comes in and it's kind of, and we know how that ended with Cassidy. It was not the best situation for the Bruins. A lot of fans and media were shocked that they fired him. And Jimmy comes in, and of course he's getting a second chance. I tell you, man, I am so impressed by him and the way that I don't know how to put, like, he's just embracing life again, and he's embracing his opportunity. And you can see when he talks to us, you can see when he's on the ice, how lucky he feels to be doing what he's doing. And I love seeing that. It's just like, I feel the same way when I do what I'm doing while I'm doing it here, or I'm writing on hockey. You know, you got to appreciate where you are, and you're there for a reason. And I see that in Jimmy, and I love it.
You know what stands out about his character? He kept Joe Sacco, one of the assistants who knew the Bruins way unbelievably well, obviously a Boston guy.
BU guy.
There's a BU guy. And then the other thing is he keeps Chris Kelly, who was part of the 2011 Stanley Cup winning team in Boston, and has been an assistant coach. And then he keeps Bobby Essensa as well as a goalie coach. Yeah. So he didn't have to do that. You know, you're a new coach, you're coming in, you get to pick
your own guys. Yeah.
And he says, you know what? I'm keeping these guys because they're good. And so I when guys do that, I have so much respect for coaches that do that, or management people, or ownership people that do that.
Yeah.
Because you know what? There's a reason why these people have been in the business as long as they have been. They're pretty good at it. And I really respect Jimmy for what he's done. Really.
And he does it too, where he's still able to, you know, insert his philosophies and his coaching methods, but blend in what these guys have been used to. And I think it's great for the players that way, because you're still keeping that familiarity, but you're getting a new outlook, a new system, so to speak, that maybe you didn't think about before. So now you blend that together, and that's why they're having so much chemistry. And look, that's why, once again, they're proving the critics wrong.
I don't have to say anything.
All right. Thank you. Well, look, we are really excited about getting, Jay Pandolfo, Greg Brown on, talk some more college hockey this week. College hockey's getting the full swing. I know Pierre, a certain McGuire had a really good weekend.
Yeah.
I know that. I was following his stats, a hat trick. So hats off to him. And I'll tell you what, too, I'm excited to talk to them. I'm excited to incorporate that. Like we said last week, we aren't just about the NHL. We're about every level of hockey. And if you have suggestions out there, guys, your viewers, and, we ask you Twitter questions, but if you have suggestions, hey, why don't you guys talk about this junior B team? If it's a good story, we're going to talk about it, because we're here to talk about the game, not about any specific level, not about any specific players or teams. We're here to talk about the game because we love the game and we love giving you the eye test on it. So I'm looking forward to this. And Pierre, like I said in the beginning of the show too, we're going to have plenty of NHL though to talk about on Wednesday and Friday, because man, it's like a hockey fan's dream with all those games on the slate.
You know what I'm excited about, Jimmy? For you to have your first opportunity to talk to Scotty Bowman, and he'll be on the show very soon. He's been watching all the
before, Pierre.
Have you?
But not with you. That's what I'm excited about.
Well, all I can tell you is he's very, very
I'll just be a fly on the wall, man. I want to do that.
He's really pumped to come on the show, and I'm so excited to have him on. It'll be great for the listeners. It'll be so good.
You know what's great, Pierre, is I remember the first time I got to speak to him when I was filling in for Mitch Melnick. I want to say this is like 2008, maybe. And I'm nervous. I mean, I'm like, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't mind doing this. I've never really gotten nervous coming on the radio or podcast or TV. I felt comfortable, and it's helped me. But that was one of those times where I was like, uh-oh, I'm going to freeze. What am I going to? And once he started talking, it all went away. He made me feel so comfortable, and he made me not in awe of who he is and what he is. And that's what I love speaking to him about. And he seems to do that. I listen to him on other podcasts or radio shows. It's a great quality to his that he's able to do that and really just bring the other person into the conversation on an even level. That's what I love about him.
Well said.
Yep. So we look forward to that. We look forward to the rest of this week. This has been another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.